Counting the homeless is difficult, it's also controversial. There's debate about how it should be done and just who is considered homeless. One group, Common Ground, and their enthusiastic volunteers conducted an early morning survey this week. Fiona Breen joined them on the streets of Hobart. Before dawn early this week, 75 volunteers went searching for Hobart's homeless. In the rain and the dark, armed with maps and torches, they were conducting Tasmania's first street survey. A handful of homeless people were found sleeping rough on the first morning.
So far I've got 4 people having checked in, so at the moment it's about 6 in the morning. I think most of the teams have done about 50 or 60% of their space.
Viv Alloms from the Salvation Army and his group of volunteers came across too.
We woke them up in a respectful manner by announcing our presence, by being quite noisy to start with so there's no surprises. We don't want to startle people. Let them know why we're there, that we wanted to ask them a few questions, gain some information about their health and their homelessness. Of course, give them something to eat as well.
A few more were found on the Tuesday morning. Others, like 39-year-old Paul Berry, turned up to breakfast run by the Richmond Fellowship.
It rained all night last night and I've got 2 layers over my tent and I'm sleeping out, so it's rough, but you survive.
In total, Common Ground's street survey uncovered 50 people living rough in Hobart. 35 agreed to fill in the group's survey.
In the past 3 years, how many times have you been homeless and then housed again?
8. Yes, I've been homeless for over 3 years, but I keep finding people's places to stay at and then becoming homeless. But just now it's been 2 months that I've been in the tent.
Paul Barry will go on Common Ground's register of vulnerable people. He might be one of the lucky ones who'll be offered accommodation in one of the 50 units now under construction in Hobart CBD.
We aim to house 50 of Hobart's most vulnerable people within the next 6 months.
The first 2 Common Ground sites on Campbell Street and Goulburn Streets are expected to open early next year. Half the tenants will be from the list of homeless and the others low-wage tenants in need of affordable accommodation.
I don't know much about it, but it seems like they're building homes and they're going to put people in them, so it'll help me personally.
How realistic are the numbers of homeless tracked down by the Common Ground volunteers? Census data from 2006 identified 200 primary cases of homelessness in Hobart. Common Ground identified 50, yet service organisations are reporting a jump in the number of people sleeping rough.
We've noticed almost doubling of homelessness since 2006.
And we had a big increase in women trying to access refuges because they just can't afford rent anymore and are evicted from their normal tenant places.
Counting the number of homeless is a controversial issue. A 2008 federal government white paper put the number nationally at around 105,000. But in March, the Australian Bureau of Statistics released a new initial estimate that was dramatically lower at around 63,000. Professor Chris Chamberlain co-authored the report that advised the government's 2008 assessment.
Now that there are targets, I think many people, the whole thing has become politicised and many people now have a vested interest. Some have a vested interest to get the numbers up and some, such as government, probably have a vested interest to get the numbers down.
The ABS says the previous research led to discrepancies in the homelessness figures, and the Bureau, along with the federal government, denies there was any directive to change the methodology in order to bring the homeless number down.
It's their analysis that's changed the figures, so the ABS ABS, working on their own assumptions and beliefs about people's situations, has removed certain people from the number that they actually counted. And in those groups you could include young people who are sofa surfing with friends or relatives, people who are staying in caravan parks, women who might have gone home with somebody to get shelter rather than just sleep out. So there's a whole range of that group, but the assumptions are not backed up by any evidence that the ABS has.
University of Tasmania's Anne Coleman worries about the pressure to come up with a figure for homeless people in Australia.
I think in Australia it's becoming increasingly politicised, and I think that that's a real risk, because I think what it does is it detracts from the actual situation and needs of people experiencing homelessness and turns into a numbers argument.
She says in Tasmania about 50% of the homeless are what's known as the invisible homeless, not included in the more recent figures. They include 20-year-old Joel GEEVES. At 4 in the morning, while the volunteers were walking the streets, he was asleep at a relative's house. They caught up with him at the Richmond Fellowship breakfast.
I was at an auntie's place. Some nights I can do that, some nights I can't. It's just a cut, you know, you can sort of call on charity so much.
He's been homeless for nearly 3 years. He hopes taking part in the Common Ground survey will be the start of better things to come.
If more public housing's built, then yeah, that would be a big leg up, because I can't work. You know, you can't work without housing. It's like a cycle. So that's all I need, and I reckon a lot of other people need, is just if they had a roof over their heads, they could get ahead.
The Australian Bureau of Statistics says it will continue to refine its method of counting the homeless. In this year's census, ABS resources were doubled. People also worked with homeless service providers nationally to encourage accurate reporting of all homeless people, including couch surfers.